Your operating system is actually the biggest threat to your private data. Yes, you heard it right. Over 1 billion machines run Windows, and most users believe Microsoft is keeping them safe. But security researchers who analyzed Windows discovered something that fundamentally contradicts that trust. Features designed to watch everything you do, record it permanently, and store it in formats that malware can steal in seconds. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why Linux desktop adoption jumped 40% in a single year, while millions of Windows users are making the switch. Here are 10 disturbing reasons why staying on Windows might be the riskiest decision you make this year. Number 10. Your computer takes screenshots of everything you do. In May 2024, Microsoft launched Windows Recall, a feature that takes screenshots of your screen every 5 seconds. The official pitch sounded helpful. Artificial intelligence would capture everything visible on your display, use optical character recognition to index every word, and build a searchable timeline of your digital life. You could ask where you saw a document last week and instantly retrieve it. Microsoft claimed all data stayed local, encrypted, and secure. Security researchers discovered the opposite. Researcher Kevin Beaumont found that Recall stored its entire database as plain text in an unencrypted SQLite file. Every screenshot, every password typed on screen, every private message sent through supposedly secure apps, sitting unprotected on your hard drive. Another researcher, Alexander Hagina, built a tool called Total Recall that automates the theft process. It locates the recall database, copies all screenshots and text to an external drive, then searches for specific keywords like passwords or credit card numbers. The entire extraction takes seconds. Even messages sent with disappearing message features enabled in apps like Signal were captured permanently. When Beaumont tested Recall against real info stealer malware, Microsoft's own Defender security software took over 10 minutes to remediate the threat, long after the attacker had already copied the entire database. Linux doesn't do this. Linux doesn't watch your screen. Linux doesn't build surveillance databases of your private activity. Number 9. Microsoft faces billion-dollar privacy investigations. In 2019, the Irish Data Protection Commission opened a formal investigation into Windows 10 telemetry after Dutch authorities concluded Microsoft's data collection potentially violated GDPR. The investigation focused on fundamental transparency failures. Microsoft didn't clearly disclose what data was collected, why it was collected, or how users could meaningfully opt out. Dutch regulators found that even when users attempted to disable telemetry, Windows continued transmitting data to Microsoft servers without consent. Under GDPR, violations carry fines up to 4% of global annual revenue. For Microsoft, that meant potential penalties reaching $4 billion. The concerns extend beyond Europe. Researchers documented fresh Windows 11 installations connecting to third-party tracking services like Comscore without user permission or notification. Users attempting to minimize telemetry through built-in settings discovered Windows continued collecting diagnostic data regardless of preferences. The pattern is clear. Microsoft collects first, clarifies later, and treats user consent as optional. Linux distributions don't phone home with your usage patterns. They don't connect to tracking services. Your data stays on your machine because Linux respects the principle that your computer works for you, not for the operating system vendor. Number 8. Perfectly good hardware declared obsolete by design. Microsoft requires Windows 11 to have TPM 2.0, a security chip standard that millions of functional computers lack. In December 2024, Microsoft published a blog post declaring this requirement non-negotiable. The official justification claims TPM 2.0 enables essential security features like BitLocker encryption and secure boot. But TPM 2.0 has been standard in new hardware for over a decade. The real effect is forcing users with perfectly capable machines to buy new devices or stay on Windows 10, which lost security update support in October 2025. Critics call this artificial obsolescence. Computers with fast processors, sufficient RAM, and modern graphics cards are blocked from upgrading because they lack a specific security chip that has nothing to do with whether the operating system can run smoothly. Microsoft frames this as future-proofing, but the environmental cost is staggering. Millions of functional devices heading to landfills because of an arbitrary hardware gate. Linux runs on hardware decades old. You can install modern Linux distributions on machines from 2010 and get smooth, secure performance. Linux extends device lifespan instead of artificially ending it. Number 7. Forced updates restart your computer without permission. Windows. Automatic updates have a notorious reputation for restarting machines at inconvenient times, closing unsaved work, and interrupting critical tasks. Even when users configure active hours or pause updates, Windows finds ways to override those preferences. The operating system treats your schedule as a suggestion, not a requirement. Registry tweaks and group policy changes can disable automatic restarts, but Microsoft makes these options deliberately hidden and complex. Average users are left with a system that decides when it's convenient to interrupt their work. The forced restart behavior reflects Microsoft's priority. Pushing updates matters more than respecting user control. Windows will wait a grace period after installing updates, but eventually it restarts regardless of what you're doing. For professionals in the middle of presentations, creatives rendering video projects, or anyone running long computational tasks, this design is unacceptable. Linux distributions update without forcing reboots for most software changes. Even kernel updates, which do require a restart, never happen without explicit user permission. You decide when your computer restarts, not Microsoft. Number 6, advertisements built into your operating system. In April 2024, Microsoft began rolling out advertisements directly into the Windows 11 Start menu. The update, labeled KB503690, added a recommended section that displays curated app promotions from Microsoft Store developers. Microsoft frames this as helping users discover useful software. In reality, it's advertising injected into core interface elements of an operating system users already paid for or came pre-installed on hardware they purchased. The Start menu ads can be disabled by navigating to Settings, then Personalization, then Start, and toggling off Show Recommendations for tips, app promotions, and more. But the fact that ads are enabled by default reveals Microsoft's business model. Your operating system is a platform for monetization, not just a tool. Beyond Start menu ads, Windows displays lock screen suggestions, notification ads, and recommended content across the interface. Linux distributions are ad-free. You will never see promotions in your application menu. Your desktop environment exists to help you work, not to sell you software. Number 5, bloatware you never asked for keeps reinstalling itself. Fresh installations of Windows 10 and Windows 11 come preloaded with games like Candy Crush, March of Empires, and other third-party software users never requested. Even after uninstalling these apps, Windows automatically reinstalls them through background processes. This behavior is controlled by a hidden registry key that silently downloads and installs curated applications without user consent. Users discovered they need to manually edit registry values at computer bhkey current user any software. Microsoft will leave Windows current version Content Delivery Manager in silent installed apps enabled to prevent Windows from reinstalling bloatware. The fact that stopping unwanted software installations requires registry editing demonstrates how little control Microsoft gives average users over their own machines. Linux distributions let you choose exactly what software gets installed during setup. There's no hidden process downloading games or trial software in the background. Your system stays clean because Linux respects that you own the computer. Number 4, telemetry. You can't fully disable Windows, collects diagnostic data and telemetry constantly. Even when users navigate to Settings, then Privacy and Security, then Diagnostics and Feedback, and disable optional telemetry, Windows continues sending required diagnostic information to Microsoft servers. There is no setting in standard Windows editions that completely stops data collection. Microsoft justifies this by claiming telemetry improves product quality and security, but users have no transparency into exactly what data is transmitted or how it's used. Researchers analyzing Windows network traffic documented connections to Microsoft servers and third-party analytics services, even when all privacy-focused settings were disabled. The operating system treats data collection as non-negotiable. Linux distributions collect nothing by default. If a Linux project wants to gather anonymous usage statistics, it asks explicitly during installation and makes opting out simple and complete. Your usage patterns, software choices, and system configuration remain private because Linux operates on the principle of user consent, not corporate surveillance. Number 3, security through obscurity versus transparency. Windows is closed, source proprietary. Software. Users cannot inspect the code to verify what the operating system actually does. When security vulnerabilities are discovered, users must trust Microsoft to develop and deploy fixes without knowing the full scope of the problem or whether other undiscovered flaws exist. This is security through obscurity. You're safe as long as attackers don't find the vulnerability first. Linux is open source, meaning the entire code base is publicly available for inspection. Security researchers, academics, and developers worldwide can audit Linux code, identify vulnerabilities, and contribute fixes. Major Linux components undergo professional security audits funded by organizations like the Linux Foundation and Open Source Technology Improvement Fund. When vulnerabilities are discovered, the entire community can track how they're addressed from initial diagnosis to final patch. This collective oversight makes it difficult to hide malicious code or ignore security problems. Transparency builds trust. Closed source software requires blind faith. Number 2, forced cloud integration and account requirements. Windows 11 increasingly pushes users toward Microsoft accounts instead of local accounts. During installation, the setup process makes creating a Microsoft account the obvious path and obscures the option to use a local account. Once connected to a Microsoft account, your settings, preferences, and activities sync to Microsoft's cloud infrastructure. This integration is marketed as convenience, but it means your data lives on servers you don't control, subject to terms of service you can't negotiate. Microsoft's cloud infrastructure, Azure, handles sensitive data for millions of users and organizations. While Microsoft implements encryption and security measures, cloud environments introduce complexity that creates attack surfaces, misconfigured identity management, federation vulnerabilities, and access control gaps. Every layer of cloud integration is another potential point of compromise. Linux operates entirely locally unless you explicitly choose otherwise. You can use cloud services if you want them, but the operating system doesn't require accounts, syncing, or server authentication to function. Your data stays on your device because that's where it belongs. Number 1, you don't control your own computer anymore. Every issue listed adds up to one fundamental problem. On Windows, you're not the administrator of your own machine. Microsoft decides what features get enabled by default. Microsoft decides what data gets collected. Microsoft decides when updates install and when your computer restarts. Microsoft decides what advertisements appear in your start menu. Microsoft decides what hardware is allowed to run its operating system. And when security researchers expose dangerous design choices like unencrypted screenshot databases, Microsoft's response is to delay rollout and tweak settings, not to fundamentally respect user privacy. Linux inverts this relationship. You choose your distribution. You choose what software installs. You choose when updates apply. You choose whether to enable telemetry, cloud sync, or any other feature that touches your data. Linux follows the principle of least privilege. Even if malware reaches your system, it can't cause system-wide damage without root access, which requires your explicit password. You own the machine. The operating system works for you. And when something doesn't work the way you want, you have the source code and the community support to change it. Windows has transformed from a tool into a surveillance platform that happens to run applications. Microsoft has spent years normalizing data collection, forced updates, hardware restrictions, and advertising as necessary features of modern computing. They're not necessary. They're choices Microsoft made to monetize your attention and your behavior. Linux desktop market share grew by 40% in 1 year because millions of users realized they didn't have to accept this. Modern distributions like Ubuntu, Fedora, and Linux Mint are polished, hardware-compatible, and genuinely user-friendly. Installation takes less than 30 minutes. Learning the interface takes less than a day. Taking back control of your computer takes one decision. If you're ready to make the switch, start by trying Linux on a USB drive without installing anything permanently. This approach, called live booting, lets you test the entire operating system without touching your current Windows installation. Download your chosen Linux distribution, use a free tool like Rufus or Etcher to create a bootable USB drive, then restart your computer and boot from that drive. You'll see exactly how Linux looks and feels on your actual hardware, with your monitor, keyboard, and peripherals. Test your essential software during this trial period. Browse the web using Firefox or Chrome, both of which work identically, on Linux. Check if your productivity apps, like LibreOffice, can open your existing documents. Explore native Linux alternatives for Windows software you depend on. Most major applications either have official Linux versions or excellent open source equivalents that handle the same file formats. For specialized Windows programs with no Linux replacement, compatibility layers like Wine or virtual machine solutions let you run Windows applications inside Linux without maintaining a full Windows installation. Once you experience an operating system that doesn't take screenshots of your screen every 5 seconds, doesn't send telemetry data you can't disable, doesn't interrupt your work with forced restarts, doesn't show you advertisements in the application menu, doesn't reinstall bloatware you explicitly removed, and doesn't declare your perfectly functional hardware obsolete because it lacks an arbitrary security chip, you'll understand why so many people are never going back. Linux treats you like the owner of your computer, not a data source to be monetized. Your machine responds to your commands, runs the software you choose, and operates on your schedule. That's not a luxury feature. That's how computing should work. Your computer should work for you. Make sure it does. Secure,